She was missing for years, and then, suddenly, a discovery changes everything. If human remains are found in a cold missing person case, the investigation pivots from hope to hard questions, and every step that follows is methodical, careful, and legally precise. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you'll get first-hand updates on stories like this and verified developments the moment they're confirmed. What happens first when remains are discovered? Securing the scene and preserving evidence. The discovery of human remains instantly transforms the landscape of an inquiry. What began as a missing person matter becomes, in practical terms, a potential crime scene. The first priority for responding officers is straightforward and urgent. Secure the area. That means establishing a perimeter, limiting access to trained personnel, and documenting who comes and goes. In rural settings where a find might be in woods, a ditch, or a remote field, securing the scene also includes controlling foot traffic, parking, and any nearby residences to prevent contamination. Law enforcement supervisors we usually call in specialized units. Homicide detectives if foul play is suspected, forensic teams, and sometimes search and recovery units with experience in evidence preservation. Why this care matters cannot be overstated. Once bodies or skeletal remains are exposed to the elements, animals, or untrained human movement, important trace evidence can be lost forever. Shoe prints, disturbed vegetation, discarded items, fibers, or tiny fragments that point to how remains arrive at a location are fragile and easily destroyed. That's why the initial responders proceed with a checklist mentality. Photograph the scene from multiple angles, map the exact GPS coordinates, and record environmental conditions like recent weather. They also control the chain of custody from the first moment a piece of physical evidence is touched, a legal safeguard that ultimately determines whether an item can be used in court. In many jurisdictions, a medical examiner or coroner is called to the scene immediately. Their role is to evaluate whether remains are recent or old, whether there are obvious signs of trauma, and whether the scene suggests an accident, natural causes, or deliberate concealment. If foul play is suspected, detectives will expand perimeter, canvass neighbors or witnesses, and start an investigative timeline of the last known movements of the missing person. In parallel, investigators will notify family members through established victim notification protocols. Sensitive, timely family contact is crucial and usually handled by specially trained victim witness staff. That first day, often chaotic and raw with emotion, is also the day when the makings of a court-worthy investigation are set in motion. Properly documented initial actions are the foundation on which later forensic and legal decisions rest. How identification is established. The forensic work to name the person. Finding remains answers one question and opens dozens more. Before investigators can treat the scene as related to a particular missing person, they must establish identity. Forensic identification is a layered process that draws on multiple scientific techniques, and the path chosen depends heavily on what state the remains are in. If soft tissue is present, fingerprints, dental records, and DNA are the fastest routes. If a body is skeletonized, anthropologists and forensic odontologists play a central role. DNA analysis is the modern backbone of identification. When remains are recent enough that tissue yields DNA, laboratories will compare genetic material from the scene to reference samples, either from personal items, a toothbrush, hairbrush, or from family members' buccal swabs. A direct DNA match provides high confidence when handled correctly. When decomposition prevents straightforward testing, mitochondrial DNA, inherited maternally, or nuclear DNA from bones and teeth can be extracted, though these tests require specialized labs and can take longer. Dental records remain invaluable. Dental work, fillings, unique tooth contours, and root structure are often enough to confirm identity when X-rays of deceased teeth exist for comparison. For older remains, a forensic anthropologist can estimate age, sex ancestry, and stature from skeletal features and can identify heel fractures, surgical implants, or unique bone morphology that a family's medical history might corroborate. Less direct but increasingly useful tools include isotope analysis, which can suggest geographical movement based on chemical signatures in teeth and bones, and radiographic or medical device matching. For instance, comparing a recovered joint implant serial number to medical records. Each piece of data builds a matrix of probability. Taken together, they yield high confidence for identification. Throughout, labs meticulously document analyses, and results are reported with degrees of certainty. Probable, presumptive, or positive identification. That language matters legally because watertight identification is essential before investigators publicly link a discovery to a named missing person. Determining cause and time of death. What science can and cannot tell us. Once identity is reasonably established, the next forensic priority is the cause and manner of death and the timeline. When did this person die and how? Medical legal death investigators work from the inside out. An autopsy, when possible, will examine organs, look for trauma, toxicology, and disease processes. In decomposed or skeletal cases, forensic pathologists lean on indicators, such as bone trauma, cut marks, or embedded foreign objects. Forensic entomology, the study of insect activity, can help estimate the post-mortem interval because insect colonization follows predictable patterns. Similarly, taphonomy, how bodies change after death, offers clues. Environmental conditions, plant growth, animal activity, and seasonal cycles all influence decomposition rates. But these fields have limits. Estimating time of death precisely becomes more difficult as the interval lengthens. A body exposed for months or years is subjected to variables. Temperature swings, water flow, scavenging, that muddy precise dating. Pathologists typically provide ranges rather than exact timestamps, and they couch conclusions in probability. Cause of death is clearer when trauma is present. A bullet fragment, a sharp force mark on bone, or blunt force leading to identifiable fractures can indicate homicide. Conversely, when no trauma is evident and decomposition is advanced, establishing cause may be impossible. In such cases, the manner of death might be listed as undetermined, while investigators seek circumstantial corroboration from the investigation. Importantly, evidence that remains were deliberately concealed strongly suggests foul play and shifts the investigative posture immediately. Concealment, burying, covering, or moving remains, indicates intent to hide, which in turn makes the manner of death more likely to be labeled homicide pending further testing. Even then, investigators must be cautious. Discovery alone does not assign guilt. Science provides facts. Interpretation and corroboration convert those facts into legal narratives. Chain of custody and evidence handling. Turning physical finds into admissible proof. The meticulous handling of evidence connects the scene to courtroom credibility. From the moment an item is collected, investigators log it, package it, label it, and preserve it under documented conditions. This chain of custody is more than bureaucracy. It's what allows a judge or jury to trust that the item presented in court is the same item found at the scene and that it hasn't been tampered with. Laboratories maintain strict protocols for receiving, testing, and reporting on materials. Analysts use controls and blind testing to ensure reliability, and they retain samples to allow for defense retesting. Every step in handling evidence carries legal risk. Contamination, sloppy documentation, or improper storage can render a key DNA match inadmissible. That reality is why law enforcement invests in training, why agencies often call in state or federal forensic laboratories with demonstrated accreditation, and why defense attorneys aggressively probe handling procedures in court. Good investigative practice includes redundant documentation. photos, video recordings, property logs, and independent officer statements. Prosecutors build cases not just on scientific finding, a DNA match, for instance, but on the unbroken chain that connects that sample to who collected it, where, and under whose authority. Investigators will also preserve evidence for the long term. Cold cases sometimes move forward years later when new testing techniques become available. Maintaining properly stored samples allows for retesting with more sensitive methods in the future, a reason many jurisdictions are careful to preserve DNA, skeletal fragments, and other materials rather than using them up in preliminary tests. How the investigation shifts: reclassification, re-interviews, and follow-up work. When remains are linked to a missing person and foul play is suspected, the case shifts from missing person protocols to homicide investigation. That shift carries both procedural and strategic changes. Homicide investigators re-examine the original timeline with renewed scrutiny, prioritizing who had proximity, opportunity, motive, and means. Past interviews are pulled, reviewed, and checked for inconsistencies. Witnesses who were previously treated as peripheral are re-evaluated. Alibis that once seemed plausible are verified against new forensic anchors like the estimated time of death or items recovered near the remains. Detectives commonly reopen discarded tips and re-examine evidence that initially seemed insignificant. That may include traffic camera footage, phone metadata, vehicle registrations, social media content, or financial records. Investigators often use subpoenas to obtain records that were previously unavailable, and they may seek search warrants where probable cause now exists. Forensic reanalysis can reveal new threads, a fiber match, a previously undetected trace of accelerant, or a different interpretation of a damaged item. A critical part of this phase is the reassessment of statements made by family, neighbors, and first responders. Memory is fallible, and initial interviews were often conducted under stress. However, new forensic findings can help investigators ask targeted follow-up questions that test earlier claims. Specialized interview techniques, cognitive interviewing, for instance, are used to improve recall without suggesting answers. Importantly, investigators remain mindful of confirmation bias. While new evidence focuses attention, detectives must avoid forcing old statements to fit a favorite theory. Good investigators triangulate, seeking multiple independent lines of corroboration before forming charges. Legal consequences and prosecutorial strategy, from evidence to court. Once the investigative team believes it has sufficient corroboration linking a suspect to a crime, the matter moves toward prosecutorial review. Prosecutors evaluate whether the available evidence meets the jurisdiction standard for probable cause and, ultimately, whether it supports a higher burden of proof required at trial, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That evaluation considers the strength of forensic identifications, witness credibility, motive, opportunity, and whether there are admissible confessions or corroborative physical evidence. Filing charges is not automatic. Prosecutors weigh the totality of evidence, defense challenges, and the likelihood of securing conviction. In many cases, grand juries may be convened to determine whether formal indictment should proceed. Prosecutors also prepare for pretrial motions that defensively attack forensic methods, chain of custody, or the voluntariness and reliability of statements obtained. Because cold case evidence can be older and more contested, prosecutors often work closely with forensic experts to build airtight documentation and to anticipate defense arguments. If charges are filed, the discovery process begins. Both sides disclose evidence and expert findings, and defense teams may retain independent experts to test lab results. Trials in such cases can hinge on technical testimony, DNA interpretations, time of death estimates, or the meaning of injury patterns, making expert credibility a decisive factor. Plea bargains remain a practical tool. In some cases, a suspect may offer information or a plea in exchange for minimized sentencing, which can help families gain answers even if full closure is partial. Community response. family care, media handling, and misinformation risks. The discovery of remains touches a community deeply. Families who have lived in limbo often feel a complex mix of grief and relief. The knowledge that a loved one is dead is a devastating clarity, but it replaces agonizing uncertainty with concrete sorrow and potentially new anger. Responsible authorities prioritize victim-family liaison, providing counseling, explaining forensic results in understandable terms, and protecting the family from media intrusion. Vigils and memorials commonly arise as the community seeks to honor the person lost and to demand justice. Media strategy is critical in this phase. Investigators must balance transparency with operational security. Releasing too many details can compromise witness safety, tip off suspects, or contaminate jury pools. Releasing too little can fuel suspicion and conspiracy. Law enforcement typically issues measured statements, confirming identification if appropriate, outlining next steps, and urging anyone with information to contact investigators, while withholding specifics that could compromise the investigation. Social media multiplies both help and harm. On the positive side, a viral post can unearth a crucial witness. On the negative side, speculation spreads fast and can lead to harassment of innocent people. Authorities often ask the public to submit tips through official channels rather than airing accusations online. Family members are frequently advised to limit their public exposure during active investigations to avoid misstatements that could be used in court or inadvertently influence witnesses. Practical takeaways. How the public can responsibly help. When remains are found in a cold case, public cooperation can be decisive. The most useful public actions are concrete and verifiable. Turning over photographs with timestamps, coming forward with license plate numbers, and reporting direct, first-hand observations to law enforcement. Memories triggered by renewed attention can yield breakthroughs. A person who saw an unfamiliar vehicle months prior might suddenly recall crucial details that help place that vehicle in the area. Equally important is restraint. Online speculation, rumor, and amateur investigations can derail official work, scare off potential witnesses, and cause immense harm to people who are innocent. If you think you have information, contact detectives directly through official tips lines. Don't post accusations on public forums. If you're a family member, seek victim assistance resources that can guide interaction with media and investigators. Wrap up. Why process matters in turning discovery into justice. Discovering human remains in a cold case is both an endpoint and a new beginning. It resolves the question of whether a missing person is alive, but opens a far more complex inquiry into cause, responsibility, and justice. The work that follows is not dramatic revelation, but painstaking science, careful interviewing, and legal groundwork. Forensic identification, robust chain of custody, and disciplined investigative practice convert that discovery into evidence that can stand in court. Community grief must be met with dignity. Families deserve clarity delivered in humane, legally responsible ways. And the public's role to provide precise, verifiable information while resisting rumor remains central. If you remember anything tied to a long-running missing case, the most helpful step is simple. Contact law enforcement through official channels and share what you know. Even a small, late detail can change an investigation's direction. The path from discovery to justice is rarely quick. But when science, careful policing, and responsible public cooperation come together, cold cases that once seemed frozen can move forward toward answers.